There's a lot to know around ethics, around what happens to a client on psychedelics. You got to be very careful with suggestibility and things. And there's things you have to know and get trained in. I always recommend comprehensive training.
This episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. Be sure and check them out, and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Everyone, and welcome to the podcast. This is episode number 359 of the Practice of Therapy podcast, and I'm Gordon Brewer. Glad you've joined us and glad you're with me on this journey, as I like to say. Looking forward to you hearing from my guest in this particular episode, Keith Kurlander. And Keith has been around a while, and if you've been in the private practice space, either listening to podcasts or other channels of things, you've probably run across Keith. Keith has a podcast himself, and his podcast is the Higher Practice Podcast, and you can find it wherever you listen to your podcast, just like this one. But anyway, in my conversation with Keith, we delve into just kind of how he has evolved over the years. In particular, he started a psychiatry practice, even though he is an LPC. And so that's been an interesting thing for him to do. And also just his work here more recently with using psychedelics in treatment of mental health disorders, which is a pretty hot, new, I guess you could say new kind of topic in our fields. But we talk about all of this, and so I'm looking forward to you hearing from Keith and just listening to his wisdom about all of this, because he's been around a while and doing a lot of great things. Before we get to my conversation with Keith, though, as we're moving towards the end of the year, one of the things that I always think about is how to get myself better organized. And one of the ways that I have done that over the years, and it's always a work in progress, but is the use of my full focus planner. And one of the things about the Michael Hyatt company that produces this planner, they've got just a whole set of products and services and books that just help you with being better organized and knowing how to set your goals and just thinking about life balance and all those kinds of things. But if you'll go over to practiceoftherapy.com/full focus planner, you can find out more about that. And I think if you go there too, you can get a little bit of a discount for the first-time buyers of the planner. I can't live without my planner and have been using it now for probably close to 10 years now. But I love it in that it's a paper planner, a paper-based planner, and there's just something about writing things down that just your brain kind of just processes things differently. But anyway, I invite you to go check it out. It is an affiliate link if you go to practiceoftherapy.com/full focus planner, but go check it out. I really enjoy using my planner. And also, as we're moving towards the holidays, if you're looking for some gifts for your staff or just for family members or anybody in your life that you want to give a bit of encouragement to, go over and check out mentalhealthwaretn.com. My good friend Ashley has put together an online store that's dedicated to the support of mental wellness and also addiction recovery, along with some cool swag for mental health professionals. So be sure and check it out, mentalhealthwaretn.com. And if you go over there, the first order that you make, you can get 20% off your first order by using the promo code TAKE20. So be sure and check it out, mentalhealthwaretn.com. And also, before we get to my conversation with Keith, I'd love for you to hear from one of the members of the Psychcraft Network, along with our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes.
Hi there, I'm Julie Harris. I'm an accountant and I'm the host of the Therapy for Your Money podcast. In the podcast, we talk about all things money and finance, specifically for therapists in private practice. You see, my accounting firm, Green Oak Accounting, specializes in working with therapists in private practice. That's all we do at this point. And over the years, we've learned so many tips and tricks for how to make the financial side of private practice work better. After all, we've seen under the hood of hundreds and hundreds of private practices. So in the podcast, I share lots of financial tools and tips and mindset shifts to help you have a profitable private practice. Therapy for Your Money is part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts, a network of independent podcasters just like me. So head over to therapyforyourmoney.com to hear episodes on topics like growing your practice, making more money without necessarily working harder, weathering the ups and downs of a practice, and so much more. Come join me at therapyforyourmoney.com.
Ready to upgrade your practice from a rusty bicycle to a shiny new sports car? Buckle up, because TherapyNotes is here to turbocharge your journey. It's the comprehensive practice management system you've been craving, equipped with everything you need to navigate patient records, schedule seamlessly, host remote sessions, craft detailed notes, and tackle insurance billing with ease. And guess what? It's your trusty sidekick, available whenever and wherever duty calls. Picture having more quality time with your clients, all thanks to this digital assistant that never clocks out. Here's the kicker. It's Gordon approved, so you can trust it's the real deal. Bid farewell to paperwork headaches and embrace a new era of efficiency and top-tier care. Ready to level up your private practice game? Swing by practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and punch in promo code GORDON for 2 months on the house. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. And I'm so happy and really almost a little bit starstruck to have Keith Kurlander with me here today. Keith, glad you're on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so if you've been around a while, you probably have run across Keith's many different hats that he wears. But Keith, as I start out with everyone, why don't you tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed?
Yeah, well, I was a therapist for 15, 18 years, private practice therapist. Loved that work. It was great. And alongside of that, I also was struggling with my own mental health issues on and off. Pretty significant mental health issues. I would say just short of hospitalization, so significant. And my search for answers wasn't only about my clients, which it rarely is, but I had real things I had to solve in my own life. So I was on a big search and found a lot of things, and eventually I realized I want to help more people. I want to help more than the 20 so people a week I was helping. And that led me first to being like, well, let me help people in our profession help more people. So I started, a company to help counselors grow their practices and reach more people. And then I realized, well, I need to really be involved in the training space so that I could really influence how mental health care is practiced. I just felt like the way we're approaching mental health care, with the rising mental health rates, the rise in treatment resistance. Like we're not doing it. So then that led me with my other co-founder to forming the Integrative Psychiatry Institute, and the Higher Practice podcast came alongside. And now we're training thousands of people a year in integrative platforms to really understand the root causes of mental health issues. And it's exciting times for, just making some change. We know a lot more than we've ever known historically, which is cool too.
Yeah, that it is. It's been an interesting journey as in the years that I've been in the therapy practice, and just seeing how much things have changed. Just even, well, of course, we'll always say post-COVID, but especially post-COVID, how things have changed with the whole mental health field. But yeah, and so I'm curious, and I think others would be, is that you started out in practice, and I think, like you've already alluded to, is that so many of us go into this work because of our own issues and things that we're working on within ourselves, and out of a sense of wanting to help others. So what were some of the things that you took from going just in private practice, and what you've learned as far as growing a practice, and what makes it work and not work, and maybe mistakes that you made along the way?
Well, when I was growing my practice, I think that one thing I didn't know in the beginning is that I'm in a competitive town. I'm in Boulder, Colorado, and there's a therapist for every person. So basically, it's a very competitive landscape, but at the same time, a lot of people do therapy here. So there's a lot of demand. But I started doing the traditional thing, knocking on doors, and I think that's really important in the therapy space, is making a lot of connections and networking. But then I was like, wait a second, I gotta, this was a while ago now, almost 20 years ago. I was like, I gotta get into the whole paid advertising space, because a lot of people are going online to find their therapist. And so then I figured that space out. And that was like, okay, now I had, 30% of my practice was just that, and was able to figure that out. And so that was a big thing of just online presence became more and more important as my practice went on. And so I had to learn that whole thing, and that was useful. So I would say that, the combination of networking, online presence was a big factor. And then the next thing later was like, oh, I have to differentiate more. Like I have to stand out in this community and learn some tricks that other people don't know. And so specialization in things that people want was key. I mean, I'm a generalist by nature, but like I needed to stand out in some way. So I realized I had to get more specialized over time.
Right. Yeah. What would you say? I know with some of the folks that I do consulting with, one question that I guess questions that come up is, what do you see as the essentials of growing a practice?
Well, I think it's different if you're starting out or you're established, right? So if you're wanting to start out, you definitely need to network. That's an essential. I think that networking is key. I think the online presence game is important, and it's not going to like get everybody in your door right away, but I think it's important to have that. So I would always say, like, you want a nice website right now, because everybody, basically that's like inviting a person into your home is your website. It's like the first impression of who you are. So I think if you're just starting out, you want to have a nice appearance, and not nice, you want to get across a message in your website. The messaging is key. Like your message needs to be distinct from the next website, and it needs to say something about the type of client you want to attract. So I think if you're starting out, that's the first basis. If you're growing, then we're in a different conversation of what you're trying to do. Are you wanting to have a group practice, and what are you trying to accomplish? I think it's a different conversation.
Right. What are the things that are exciting you the most about our professions right now?
Well, right now, psychedelic therapy is exciting me the most. That's where I'm pretty focused on, growing awareness. I think it's essentially an old and new modality. So, but it's a new wave for psychotherapy. Like we will see over the next decade, I think, and we'll think of it as a new wave of psychotherapy where a lot of people are practicing it in 10 years from now, and a lot of clients are like, I've done that modality. It's a short-term modality in the sense that you're not going to be doing psychedelic therapy and taking psychedelics for a year or two. It's probably a couple months and you're done with your treatment. But that excites me in terms of a modality that actually could have a very large impact for this whole treatment resistance issue we're seeing.
Yeah. So why is it, I mean, just this might be a very basic question, but why is that working so well for people?
It's a good question. So it works differently than any other modality is why it works so well. It's not a panacea. I don't like to say that, but it works well because it's a disruptor. And so when we go to ordinary consciousness therapy is the best way to say it, because we talk about psychedelic therapy as non-ordinary consciousness. In ordinary consciousness therapy, and that can be a gamut of modalities, it's, doesn't matter what tradition, CBT, depth therapy, whatever. The way you think about things is static. Essentially, you're coming in, you think about things in a certain way, and there's a slow process of looking at things from a different perspective. But it's a slow process. We don't change our perceptions and our worldviews and our ways we think about ourselves and our belief structures. That's a slow haul. And it's helpful and important. Also, trauma is a slow process there, resolving trauma. There's a reason to be sensitive with trauma and go slow on one level. But with psychedelic therapy, it's an amplifier and it's a disruptor. It's both. So we're amplifying material inside of us. So you're like taking the amplifier and turning the volume way up. So it's like if music was very faint in the background, now it's blaring at you. And so that's one thing it does. But it's also like you're also hearing music you never heard for the first time sometimes because it's so loud. So now we're getting disrupted about the way we see things and think about things. And so that can be both a cathartic, positive, transformative process. Sometimes it can be a little disturbing and disruptive and, can be a problem for some people. But mostly the research shows it's actually very helpful and it causes change very quickly. As one treatment, it doesn't mean you're not done there. Like you still have to go and do the hard work. But it's exciting that we have a tool that can put a wrench in our, rigidity.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think a lot of us are very familiar with EMDR and kind of the same principle, but just a different way of getting to it is at least my understanding of how psychedelics are working is that whole, as you mentioned, that whole disruption process of really kind of getting our brains to create new neural pathways in many ways. Yeah. And like you said, EMDR, which is a good point, which is, in terms of a trauma modality, psychedelic therapy is a trauma modality. I mean, because psychedelics often reliably will amplify trauma in your nervous system. So most people, when they do psychedelic therapy, are going to contact either implicit trauma memory where it's in the body, we don't know exactly what it is, but it's there, or more explicit and direct trauma memories. So there is psychedelic therapy is, especially MDMA, is obviously a trauma modality. That's the whole research behind MDMA assisted therapy, which we don't have access to yet outside of research because it got rejected recently by the FDA, but hopefully that's coming in a few years. Yeah. So are there any times where psychedelic therapy is really kind of contraindicated or you wouldn't want to go?
For sure. I mean, definitely psychosis. We don't see a lot of psychedelic therapy studies on psychosis, and it probably would aggravate it most likely. There's some psychedelics that don't play well with bipolar 1 for sure, probably bipolar 2. It depends on, what's for the bipolar 2 spectrum different. Like, for instance, there is some small research with ketamine assisted therapy and some bipolar, so that's a possibility. Personality disorders, back in the day, there was some research with LSD and working on personality disorders and things, but it's we don't know. So there's that. But in terms of like contraindicated, there's medical contraindications. And I would say dissociative stuff like depersonalization, and if you're like living with that kind of thing, the psychedelics could amplify that, and that wouldn't feel good to a person. So sometimes if we're very dissociated, it doesn't play well.
Right.
Depends what the flavor of the dissociation is. But when you look, generally speaking, it does play well. Depression, anxiety, trauma, kind of the big three things, it plays pretty well with, generally speaking.
Right.
Yeah.
If somebody was, one of the things kind of going a little bit full circle to what we were talking about earlier is having a specialty or a niche within your practice is so important in growing it. And I think with this new research and the new evidence that's there around psychedelics, if somebody wanted to start down the road of, okay, I'm going to start offering this as a service, how do they go about doing that?
So right now, the way that, well, first of all, they should get trained, because
Obviously.
it's a whole different animal. There's a lot to know around ethics, around what happens to a client on psychedelics. You got to be very careful with suggestibility and things. And there's things you have to know and get trained in. And so that's one thing. And I always recommend, comprehensive training, 6 months to a year minimum, because it's a big deal. Like, you could see some crazy things of what people will say or kind of look like on psychedelics and be like, whoa, I've never seen this before. But then outside of that, they're going to get started right now. Outside of Colorado and Oregon, you're going to be using ketamine assisted therapy right now. That's the only, it's a prescription medication. You have to get connected with a prescriber who's working with the patient also. But that would be the only way to get involved right now, outside of research, outside of those two states. And it's a great medicine actually for psychedelic assisted therapy, because it's short. It's a 2-hour session. So it's a great way for someone who's like, I want to be able to offer these interventions, but I don't want to be doing 6-8 hour sessions all the time. I don't want to make it my whole career. I want to have it in my toolkit. 2-hour session, that's very manageable for a therapist who's not going to make it their whole thing. So that's how they would get involved.
Yeah. Where are the places to get the training?
Well, I mean, I guess I would say, I mean, there are others, but we're definitely the most comprehensive training. Our training has the most hours. It's the most comprehensive. It has the most hands-on, actual practicum experience that you could do. So I would, check out our website, psychiatryinstitute.com/apply. That would be the page to check out for the psychedelic assisted therapy training.
Yeah. So to kind of walk us through that training process, I'm assuming there's some kind of classroom time and that sort of thing, and then, like you said, practicum. So what does that typically look like, and what is the time commitment for people?
So our training's a 10-month training. It's mostly online. It's about a 4 to 5 hour commitment a week. Let's say 3 to 5 hours a week over 10 months. You're training in a full modality in our training. There are weekend ketamine trainings, but I don't think that's personally you're going to go hold space for someone after a weekend. There's so much you really need to know to do this well. So I don't think it's a great idea personally, but you can do it that way. So it's 3 to 5 hours a week. It's everything from, most of it's online, so it's everything from you're having lectures every week, the live lectures that are available to interact with the faculty, covering all the different areas from science to ethics to therapy processes to the integration, the preparation, all this research. And then we're doing home group discussions. So you're in a small group of 10 people with our, faculty, where they're facilitating discussions of the material. We have large group seminars where you're in breakout rooms and you're role playing and you're actually trying this in an online format. And then we bring you out, depending on how you choose your program, there's different options, but you'd go to Oregon for a 4-day or 6-day practicum with psilocybin. We have a center out there. Oregon passed psilocybin services in 2021. I can't remember the year they passed it. But they came online where people were able to use it last year. And so we send you out there. And then we also have a ketamine assisted therapy practicum in Colorado, where these are hands-on things.
Yeah. So I'm curious, with the difference of effectiveness, if I'm reading between the lines, in your mind, psilocybin is more effective than ketamine. And you want to distinguish?
I wouldn't say it that way. No.
Okay.
No. So there's 3 main medicines to know about right now in the moment, and that's MDMA, psilocybin, and ketamine. MDMA's indication is PTSD. Some studies show upward to 70% of people with treatment-resistant PTSD are getting better after the protocol. Now, again, the FDA said we need more research. We're not ready to give you the green light there when they put their drug application in this summer. So we'll see. We have a few more years, I think. But I still feel pretty confident. I think it's going to happen because the FDA didn't give an outright denial. They said they wanted some more safety data and a couple other nuances that were problematic in the study. So that's MDMA. Ketamine, you can see up to 50 to 70% for treatment-resistant depression. Now, what's really cool with ketamine is it's 2-hour session. The protocols are not as standardized. We didn't do a FDA phase 3 trial for that, but there's hundreds and hundreds of. And so with that, you see sometimes symptoms are cut in half for up to 70% of people. And so that's big for treatment-resistant depression.
Sure.
And you're going to also see sometimes within 1-2-hour session, suicidal ideation going away. That's crazy, right? One session. And then psilocybin. But ketamine protocol, generally speaking, is 4 to 6 sessions over the course of a month, generally speaking. And then there's preparation and integration sessions. Psilocybin, the data, I wouldn't say it's more compelling than ketamine, but a lot of the research is treatment-resistant depression. There's end-of-life anxiety research. There's others. But it depends which studies you're looking at. We're in a phase 3 study now with Compass Pathways, Usona Institute. I don't know if they've officially started their phase 3 study or not. Anywhere from 30 to 50% with treatment-resistant depression, reduction in symptoms. So, yeah, so it's across the map. But when you look at antidepressant research, the psychedelic research for depression is very compelling. So it's as good or better sometimes. Now, durability is a different question of how long does it last? And, that's not fully known yet. I would say across the board, there's good evidence to say that it's fairly durable with psilocybin and ketamine. And then PTSD, I would say that evidence is good. That evidence is stronger of okay, we've actually resolved some trauma here. Yeah,
that's great. Yeah, it's really fascinating research, and I remember of course not, as we've kind of alluded to, EMDR being similar, kind of works in similar ways, and that you're kind of it's not a clinical term, but rewiring the brain a little bit. I know my sister-in-law, who's a psychologist, she just recently finished her EMDR training, and she said to me, "Gordon, it's just witchcraft. It's just witchcraft." And so I was just thinking with psychedelics and that kind of thing, here being on the tail ends of Halloween, it's kind of tongue in cheek. You think about it that way, but it is so effective.
Yeah. Well, it definitely has a witchcraft element to it. So
Yeah, right.
it's a little witchy.
Yeah. That's great. I have to be respectful of your time and tell folks how they can get in touch with you and if they want to find out more from you.
Oh, yeah. They definitely, the psychiatryinstitute.com. That's the Integrative Psychiatry Institute's website. I said, you can find the psychedelic therapy training page there. The Higher Practice podcast, come check out our podcast, is a great place to just get connected to the conversation. And that's where we're just really talking a lot about what causes mental health issues. How do you solve them? How do you live a better life? How do you live a more optimal life? Get what you want in life, feel well inside. So those are great places to check out.
Yeah, and we'll have links here in the show notes and the show summary to get to those easily. And the Higher Practice podcast is really a great podcast. It's one of the better ones out there, I would say. Yeah. So,
thanks.
Well, Keith, thanks again for being on this episode, and look forward to hopefully having more conversations in the future. Well, a big thanks to Keith for being on the podcast. And be sure and check out his things by going to psychiatrycenters.com. And also, we've got links here in the show notes and the show summary. And also, check out his podcast, the Higher Practice podcast, where it really kind of delves into mental health issues and just helping people kind of overcome the struggles that we can all face at different times, but in particular, those that are maybe a little more persistent. So be sure and check him out. Again, thanks to him for joining me on the podcast. Hopefully I'll be able to get him back on here before too long. Also, be sure and check out the Full Focus Planner. If you'll go over to practiceoftherapy.com/full focus planner, you can look at the landing page I created there that also gets you links to all of the Michael Hyatt products that I'm really enjoy using for myself and just really helps me stay more goal-oriented and also organized with what I'm doing. And I can't think of a better time to start working on those things than the beginning of a new year. So we've got that coming up. So again, thanks for joining me on the podcast. Be sure and check out our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes. And you can go over to practiceoftherapy.com/TherapyNotes and use the promo code just Gordon, Gordon, to try them out for 2 months for free. I'm constantly impressed with all the new things they're coming out with and new features, and just how that platform just works so well for my practice and for so many others. And it's well worth the investment into something like TherapyNotes, particularly in just running the whole clinical side of your practice and also the business side too, as far as tracking things and making sure that you're following up on claims and that kind of thing. So be sure and check them out. TherapyNotes. You can go to therapynotes.com or go to practiceoftherapy.com/TherapyNotes and use that promo code just Gordon, Gordon. So looking forward to being with you again in the next episode and just thinking about winding down 2024. Ali, it's hard to believe that we're already near the end of the year again. And we've got episode number 360 coming up. So hard to believe we've been doing it that long, but glad you're with me. Take time to follow us and subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And also check out us on Instagram and also Facebook, LinkedIn, and I think we've still got, an X feed now instead of Twitter. So anyway, check it out. Take care, folks. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.